Welcome to Shrinks Who Drink with Amita Kosh. This monthly podcast dives into special topics in mental health, exploring themes like motivation, anxiety, trauma, and depression. Each episode is designed to engage, inform, and inspire. Join us for candid conversations with expert guests, sharing their lived experiences and professional insights. Your host, Amita Kosh, is a passionate mental health advocate and professional dedicated to fostering meaningful discussions around mental wellness. With a knack for storytelling and a love for connecting with others, Amita brings warmth, insight, and a touch of humor to every episode. Get ready to explore deep topics, hear unique perspectives, and gain practical advice. Now let's get started.
This is Amita Kosh coming to you from Cincinnati, Ohio. Shrinks Who Drink. Pick up your cup, Paul.
Oh, cheers
Shrinks Who Drink. Chai.
Tink.
Tink. Yes. So, Paul and I have known each other for decades. However, we sort of lost touch in the middle with, children and careers and all that stuff. Paul is my dear friend and my dear friend Rachel's husband, and we've known each other since college in Louisville, Kentucky. So Paul is a native of Louisville, Kentucky. He is a graduate of University of Louisville, and he retired after 37 years in the financial industry. And that
37 years in a row.
In a room. I know. I remember that you started working there when you were still in college at night.
That's right. It was my book and beer money. My parents were happy to pay tuition and dorm, but I had to buy my own books and I had to pay for my own beer. So I got this part-time job that later turned into a career.
Right. So you worked in technology deployment and you were director of operations, industry expert in payment systems, and software agile development coach and trainer and educator for Chase.
That's right.
And your entire career has been with Chase.
That's right. Well, through bank mergers and acquisitions,
Okay.
But yes, I'm a retiree of JP Morgan Chase, and 37 years was at JP Morgan Chase or predecessor banks that JP Morgan Chase purchased.
Right. That is incredible because, most people nowadays change jobs so many times that it's so unusual to hear that, you've been
I'm
in
a
the
dying breed.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yes. Now, Paul is married and a father of 2 adult sons, and he is a long-time student of yoga and yogic practices. He's an informal student of Eastern, specifically Vedic and Buddhist philosophies and traditions. And he is also an expert meditator, specifically Transcendental Meditation and mindfulness. And Paul, you like to explore the nature of consciousness and our relationship to and with consciousness states. So that is, we're going to bring it down to earth. We're going to talk about it in terms that everybody can understand. So,
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about your interest in doing this podcast.
Oh, well, I was our mutual friend, Ingrid, and I think she actually did your introductory
Yes.
podcast, episode 1. I saw that. Came by to walk with Rachel. Your friend Rachel says hello, by the way.
Oh, okay.
And she mentioned, Amita, that you were doing this podcast, and I don't know, Ingrid came over and I was meditating, or somehow it came up, and she said maybe Amita would like to talk to you about this, and I'd like to talk to just about anybody about these topics. And so that's kind of how we got to this point where we're having this discussion. And I agree that much of how you described me, some of that I even typed out for you. First of all, those are very kind words, and I appreciate that. Much of that can sound esoteric and sort of inaccessible, and it's not meant to sound that way. And I hope in our discussion today, I'm able to impress upon you and those listening that all of this is available in our natural state, of being, access to the serenity and equanimity that these practices, particularly meditation, I'd like to talk about. This is our natural state. This is our birthright. These are not foreign, difficult to understand concepts. that come from faraway traditions. I would posit with you and assert that they are in fact naturally coded into us as these biological creatures. We're built to experience equanimity and peace of mind. So I hope when we talk about this, it
Sure.
becomes more and more apparent that this is very accessible and very natural state that's available to everyone.
Right, right. So, Paul, tell me how you got involved in this. With being a guy growing up in Louisville,
Yeah,
Kentucky, kind of sort of in the Bible Belt, and raised
sure.
Catholic, right?
Yes, that's right.
Right,
Yeah, I went
raised
to Catholic
Catholic. Yeah,
elementary school and
yeah.
then went on to public. But yes, raised in a Catholic family.
Right, right. So I know that you and I had talked a little bit about your sort of transition to this side of the eastern side, and then my transition from we'll talk about that some more. But I want you to tell us your journey. How did you get there?
Sure. Well, I was very curious. I attended, as I said, for a number of years, I attended Catholic elementary school and was in a very large Catholic family and attended Mass and was very intrigued by some of the fundamental teachings, in the Catholic Christian faith, Jesus Christ. And I found him to be a captivating character as a child and was very interested in the personal experience of the teachings. Now, and this is in no way a judgment of Catholicism. My experience was that there was quite a distance between the practitioner, the devotee. Sometimes I think of Jesus as like the supreme guru, the devotee, and the teacher. There was this vast distance, and there were layers of access and ritual. And I became captivated by the notion that we can learn from other traditions that there's a direct access and that it is natural for us to experience these states of consciousness that seem mystical, maybe the Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad or the whirling dervishes all achieve these mystical states, and somehow those are distant from us. So I became very curious, even as a young child, about what it would be like to have those experiences without all of these rules and structures and I'm not judging those at all. They have their purpose, I will admit. But that started my curiosity. And then going to university, where there was far more open discussion. Dr. Orbach was a professor at the University of Louisville, and Dr. Rifat Hassan, comparative religious studies, exposed me. Dr. Hassan exposed me to Hinduism, Vedic traditions, and that led to my real exploration of Buddhism, meditation, and yoga.
Yeah, yeah.
That really started hitting me in college, which I think is fairly common. The
Right,
young
right,
mind gets
right.
to university and explores.
So, it's interesting. I just want to add something to what you just said, is that it's not just Christianity where the disciples are getting further and further away from the main guy. I think that is true for most organized religions. Even in Hinduism, I mean, originally the belief was that you could not even convert to Hinduism. You had to be born a
Hmm.
Hindu. And if you weren't born a Hindu, tough
You're
luck,
out.
you're out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're not allowed into the temples, and all of that, and that you had to go through a Brahmin and a Brahmin priest to talk to God. So I think that that's true for most organized religion, is that I mean, I am very open about the fact that I think that organized religion is more about politics and power than it is
Sure.
about salvation and that kind of stuff. So I think, as far as your experience of Christianity goes, it's not that different, because especially with me growing up in India, all the prayers were in Sanskrit, and so it's like Latin, and it's like, well, I don't know what I was saying. I mean, we
Right.
went to the temple, and they say, oh, well, 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 and we just said it. It's like we just pronounced it. We didn't know what the heck we were saying. So I
Right.
think that another layer of distance or separation that it causes for normal people to have access to that higher power. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that's true for most religions.
Sure. Sure. I
Yeah,
would agree with that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So so your journey of coming, growing up Catholic and then going to college and starting to kind of discover and things like that. I wanted to share a little bit about my journey because it's a little bit different in the sense that I grew up in India, where even though it's considered a secular country so far, but Hinduism is the majority religion in India. And so I grew up in a very, very Hindu dominated culture. And it was all around us. But my family, particularly, were not super religious. So we were fairly secular. And so the only way I knew anything about religion was Hinduism, was just, the festivals. And that was more of a cultural thing. It was more of a celebration than it was a religious thing. Like, we did not have Sunday school, or we didn't have anything like that. So we learned about the stories, the mythologies as stories. And then we had festivals, and we got dressed up, we went and we prayed. Most of the time we didn't know what we were praying for or anything. Sure. And it's a big party. We had fun. My interest, but also on the other hand, to add to this, is that I went to a Catholic grade school, a Catholic high school, and a Jesuit college in India. So my exposure to Catholicism was fairly, vast. We didn't go to catechism, but we were exposed to that. I mean, I had to say the Lord's Prayer every morning in assembly. It's like I grew up in a very culturally and religiously diverse, a culture, but at the same time, I missed out on the depth of learning Hinduism. And so my learning of Hinduism, Buddhism, and, Vedic philosophy was more as an adult, self-taught, after I came to this country. So that's just an interesting, kind of fact.
So, sort of in a peculiar way, you were all the way in the East, as far in the East, perhaps, or nearly as far in the East as you could go growing up. I was as far in the West as you could go, but we both had this like Catholic youth experience, both had this curiosity about the Vedic traditions in Hinduism. We both went to the same university and in different ways wound up on similar sort of journeys.
Right.
The universe is a mysterious set of circumstances, isn't it?
I know.
It's comical.
Yes, but it's exciting. It's super exciting. Obviously, I had no idea that you were into meditation and this, the Vedic literature and the way, Buddhism and things like that. So I'm super excited to talk to you about that. So tell me, what are your thoughts about how relationships shape how we see ourselves and our conditions? Like, our relationships, our thoughts, and what have you learned from your readings of Hinduism, Buddhism that brings that together?
Well, you said something interesting that I want to zero in on, and I'll probably hit on it a few times in this discussion. You said our thoughts. I'm using scare quotes there.
Okay.
Our thoughts. And so the first thing that I would like to put on offer as a consideration, and it may sound provocative or even goofy in a way, is I'm not really convinced that there's such a thing as our thoughts. I'm not entirely convinced that I have my thoughts. And when I talk a little bit about meditation and more to tell, this will shape up and make a little more sense. I believe that thoughts are manifesting, they're occurring, they're a phenomenon, and they're a phenomenon that our brains, which are an organ, experience and witness when it comes in contact with mind, the phenomenon of consciousness. And we are conscious beings, but we don't have our own consciousness. Like, we don't have our own weather. We don't have our own ocean. When I go get in to the Pacific Ocean, I don't say I'm experiencing my ocean now. I'm experiencing the ocean. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to put that out there. But your question started with how relationships are formed and how they form the way we perceive the world and the world perceives us. One, I think a large percentage of our relationships, which can add to the experience of anxiety and frustration and concern, are self-projection. And we get confused. Like I might think that I have this friendship with Amita. Well, I certainly do. That can be evidenced, right? That's empirically testable. But then the composition of that friendship, like if we were to do separate quizzes, there would be many aspects of that friendship that you would describe that I would not describe, and vice versa. And then if we got real honest about those descriptions, what you would be describing would sound like me projecting, not entirely, but to some extent, me projecting myself onto you, my expectations, my thoughts about how things should be, my feelings about those things. Again, not judging that. This is the natural state of being. But, and I would say this becomes more apparent as we dedicate time to understanding and practicing meditation. We start to create just a little bit of space between this notion of what is mine and what is yours. And when we create that space, things start to become apparent what is outside of what is Amita's view of how I should behave or what my expectations are of Amita, which I will still have. Friendships are functional relationships. Expectations are natural. We should always be open and honest about those expectations, but I will have them. I won't be in a relationship without expectation. But the practice of meditation and a better comprehension of the nature of consciousness and states of consciousness allows us to experience this little bit of space. I'm making this space with my hands here, where I can witness that there is the thing free of my evaluation and assessment of it. And when I can see it that way, it doesn't always function that way, but when I can see it that way, then my expectations can be managed appropriately. I can
All right, I'm going to
articulate them to myself.
stop you there.
Am I rambling?
No,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. Yeah, the reason I'm stopping you is because I want to bring this down a few notches
Oh, am I
for
getting a little?
people to relate, to be able to relate to what you're saying. Okay.
Okay. All
So,
right.
so meditation.
Yeah.
Let's first say, what is meditation? Tell us that.
Okay, so I would define meditation as an inward journey, not an outward journey,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it somewhat unique, where we go in, and there are probably three different types of meditation. Concentration meditation, which is Zen, oftentimes. Think about the flame of the candle. Then there's mindfulness meditation, very commonly understood. This is allow the breath to guide you, allow thoughts to come and go, don't perseverate on a thought or grab to a thought. And then transcendental meditation, which is fairly unique in its own right, which is mantra meditation. But for me, meditation,
Explain what is mantra.
mantra is a sound that is imbued with no specific definition or meaning. And in transcendental meditation, the mantra is private to me, to the student, transmitted to me only by my teacher. And it is a sound that is never articulated. It works inside my head. And I can talk about the transcendental meditation technique in a moment. But for me, meditation is in any three of those domains of meditation, going inward and having contact with the greater self, recognizing that the little self that's preoccupied with everything
So I'm going to
is only
stop you
part of
there.
our
What is
life.
the greater self and what is the little self?
The greater self, and we have lots of vocabulary available for this. So many of us think of this as God. Many of us think of this as nirvana. Like, in Buddhism, we melt into nirvana and we don't reincarnate once we reach enlightenment. Many people talk about it's their spiritual self, their connection to their spiritual self. And that's the greater self, the self with the capital S. In transcendental meditation, we write capital S for self when we're talking about
Would it
this
also be
particular.
similar to, in my mind, I think of it as the universal consciousness?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great
Okay.
way to put it.
Okay.
And that's very free of any freight that comes along with a religious
Right.
conviction.
Right.
Yeah, universal consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And then the small self, the little self, is the selves that are acting right now, you and I, in our small self. Nothing wrong with that. We live out most of our lives in the small self.
So the
Top of the
small
ocean.
self is more expressed or experienced through our physical state, through our, I guess maybe even emotional states, and
Mhm.
through our ego states.
Mm-hmm. The ego, you're talking about the ego, like the self, the
Yeah.
the
The ego,
absolute
not
thing.
in the sense of like, he's a narcissist, that kind of ego,
Right.
but ego in the sense of I am me,
Yeah, id,
that.
ego, super
Yeah,
ego. Right.
right, right. Yeah,
I have theory of mind. I know there's a Paul. I see him in the mirror. I know how he relates to Amita or my wife or my children or my other friends. Yes, that's the small self. And it's practical. The
yes,
small self drives to the grocery because the small self knows we need food. The
right.
small self serves a very important purpose in the world.
Yeah.
And as such, it is also a gateway for anxiety, and
Hmm.
which is a normal experience. We have to have some
Right.
anxiety, frustration,
Yeah.
fear, anger.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to, you were saying, our thoughts, and, the you started out with, there's that space that we create with meditation, and so I asked you to explain meditation. So one other thing I wanted to add to the description of meditation is a simple explanation is paying attention without judgment.
Mm,
And so, I think that oftentimes what causes anxiety, what causes a lot of the conflict that we experience in um, through the small self, is the judgment, and not just the judgment of others, but also the judgment of ourselves. So,
yes.
as a therapist, I work with that a lot with my clients, where there's a lot of judgment of, oh, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, why can't I be better? Or he did this wrong, she did this wrong, why can't they be better? So that brings us back to the relationship, thoughts, and how does the relationship shape how we see ourselves and our conditions.
Mm. Wow, that's a big question. You're posing that question to me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I like what you said. I'd like to just touch on that before I jump into this. And oftentimes I'll describe the meditative experience as a place that the little self can go, and there's no evaluation and no assessment. There's no scoring. I
Hmm.
didn't meditate well or poorly. I simply meditated. Thoughts came. They weren't good thoughts or bad thoughts. Thoughts just came. Um, so again, back to like the relationship, and in particular how a meditation practice for me personally and many of my friends in the community, the meditation community, experience it by exposing to myself the nature of expectations, which are thoughts, and that I am not singularly the source of them, nor are you. They are simply thoughts that manifest, and they are expectations, and I can see them for their naked selves. I can see them not masquerading as something. You know, Amita must always do this. She should know that. Well,
Hmm.
this is foolishness. I should articulate it to Amita,
Hmm.
and the hardest thing to do is articulate that which we cannot see. First,
Hmm.
we must see it before we can describe it. And I'm a big believer that meditation, a regular meditation practice, which is relatively easy to establish, creates that space where you begin to see thoughts are not mine. I am not my thoughts. Many of these thoughts are expectations about my relationship to my spouse or my employer.
Hmm.
And I can see them naked and pure,
Hmm.
free of assessing myself or others, and then just articulate them. Oftentimes, simply articulate them to myself.
Hmm.
And then they oftentimes evaporate,
Hmm.
or they very easily categorize themselves and become quite manageable.
Hmm.
Quite manageable.
So I'm going to put this again in the context of psychology and therapy and things like that. So what you're saying is meditating allows us to have this space, which you called space. um, I'm saying room. Okay, it allows
Mhm.
us to have room to see our thoughts in a sort of non-judgmental, transparent, um, clear way, see other people's actions, behaviors as in the same way, and then allow us to make a decision as to how we want to move forward.
Yes. You summed it up far better than I did. Yeah, precisely that.
Okay.
Precisely that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And so, I think that with clients, I mean, I am always asking them to meditate, to meditate, to meditate. Of course, it's the new buzzword now. Mindfulness, and
Sure.
everybody is talking
Yeah.
about it. But the fact is that just not reacting, and in order to not react, we meditation helps. Meditation
Yes.
helps. I describe it to people who are old like us, about the VHS tapes. I'm like, remember how you used to be able to slow motion things? I'm like, that's what meditation allows you to do. It allows you to slow down things enough so you can actually see it and have time and space to decide how you want to respond.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, from for a everyday person who is not really experienced in meditation, or studies any of these philosophies or things like that, that is a practical way that I find to explain to people what meditation can do for them. I mean, obviously, there are so many more things that meditation can do for people, but I think just the basic, and this right there helps with the relationships, because most of the times the conflicts we have in relationships, like you said, is about these expectations that are not being met, and then
Mhm.
people are mad or pissed off, or like, oh, I can't believe they did this, blah 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 blah. And even when you can articulate and be very clear about what you expect, it can still not be met. And that happens all the time. You can be very great at articulating, and they can still say, I'm not doing it. So
Mhm.
you still have that opportunity to decide how you want to respond to that.
Well, in that, yes. And in that circumstance, I would say, and then if they choose not to meet that expectation, there is no confusion. So we're all very clear now. I'm
Yeah.
clear that I have this expectation because now I can see that I do, and I can describe it to you. And then it's very fair to the other party. Oh, it wasn't apparent to me that you expected that, and now it is. And let me say to you, I am not going to meet that expectation. Okay, now we have something we can manage to and discuss.
Yes.
It demystifies, not entirely, but it demystifies much of the attributes and characteristics of these relationships.
Right, right. And the confusion, misunderstandings, and things like that. Yeah. So
Mhm.
that is just one small thing that meditation can do.
Yeah, and it's immediately available.
Yes.
There's nothing magical about any of those three types of meditation: concentration, mindfulness, or mantra, transcendental meditation. These are all wholly available and natural activities.
Right, right. So the next question I had is, how does consciousness, as you describe it,
Mhm.
manifest from the brain, which is the organ, which is the physical organ, through the mind, the
Mhm.
phenomena? How does that work? Tell
Mhm.
us your understanding of
Well,
it.
okay, and you'll dial me back. You may have to, if I get a little esoteric, you'll edit that out or control that for me. Please rein me in. So we have this great breakthrough, and I bring a Western mind to it first because I was born and raised here. Uh, the Cartesian view of the world, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. The brain and mind is separate from the physical body, and empiricism rules all. And if I can measure it, it is valid, true, and real. And if it cannot be measured or quantified, it's fantasy or artificial. And so we know that this is a very practical view of matters. And I want a heart surgeon who's very Cartesian in her view of things. I want a heart surgeon who's like, I have a
Hold
procedure
on a
where she
second.
does this.
Can you check your connection? It sounds like your sound is just kind of messed up a little
In and
bit.
out.
Yeah.
Okay, let me check here. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. All right. Thanks for that. And so the so what we're coming to understand in the West is the long-standing tradition in the East was that this duality, like Advaita Vedanta, the whole this and that, me and it, me and other, is an illusion. It's a very practical illusion that serves a purpose, but it's a hoax. In the end, it's a hoax. And we forget that we need to put that hoax down and see things as they really are. where duality is just an illusion.
Okay,
So
what do you mean by duality?
there is me, and then there are things that aren't me. This comes from the ego, the state of the ego. There
Uh-huh.
is a Paul, and then there's everything that is not a Paul.
Okay.
This is an absolutely practical view of things. That's how I get to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Right? And I want my heart surgeon to see that her education served a purpose, the practical matters. But in the broader sense, where we come to the big self, the big
Mm-hmm.
S self, this duality needs to be seen as the hoax that it is, or we will continue to suffer, endlessly suffer. And we can get into the like, this is why we're reincarnated if we believe this, such matters. And we will be reintroduced
Well,
because
I
we
mean,
must
on
suffer
a
this again.
practical level, I think that a lot of the conflict in the world comes from this idea of duality. You
Self
know,
and other, yes.
self and other, my
Yeah.
country versus your country, my religion versus your religion, women versus men, humans versus animals, all of it. So we can look at it in everyday terms and see how this duality plays out and causes, I mean, again, on one level it's very essential because
Mhm.
I'm not going to survive if I give all my money away to the homeless person down the street, and then I get kicked out of my home. That on a practical level I have to have that, but on a larger scale, constantly thinking of me versus everybody else puts us in this place of fear, anxiety, and animosity towards everybody else.
Yes. This endless cycle of evaluation and assessment. Right. So, for purposes intended, the perception of self makes really good sense. And then we must put it down from time to time and look beyond it, see past the illusion, so that we can reorient, recalibrate, regain our footing, and then resume the self of Paul. Like he gets to the grocery store, he pays the taxes, he is necessary, he
Right.
is real, but it is true and real, but wholly incomplete. And meditation brings us into that state very briefly where we're reconnected with our feet are planted again in that space where that illusion evaporates. We remember, oh, I remember now, as I remembered at my birth,
Yeah.
when my mother birthed me, the state of consciousness I was experiencing then.
Right. So
Right?
tell
And
me a little bit about any experience that you have had of
mm,
maybe just that curtain being lifted a little. Have you had
sure,
that? And
sure.
what was that like?
Sure. I have two such examples. The first example that I would share is when I learned transcendental meditation from my teacher, Carrie. And a great resource, by the way, and maybe you'll put this in the notes, is tm.org.
Okay.
If anyone wants to learn more, they should go to tm.org. So I went to learn to meditate from my teacher. Transcendental meditation must be taught one on one, it's
Okay.
part of the process. And we don't talk about that process. It's a private process.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation and the experience inside of meditation is a private space and an intimate space. But when I learned, as I learned, it was the first time I meditated using the transcendental technique. I believed that perhaps my eyes were closed and I was doing the technique, my mantra, as it was
Mm-hmm.
transferred to me by my teacher for a couple of moments, for 2 or 3, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I felt like I was sitting there 2 or 3 minutes, and it had been 16 minutes. And I opened my eyes, and my teacher smiled and said, yes. He had seen from the physical state of my being, the relaxed, calm state I was in, that I was experiencing the transcendental state of consciousness.
Hmm.
So what was felt like maybe 2 minutes to me was 16 minutes of elapsed time. And I was almost entirely operating free of any sense of self. Almost entirely, not entirely. That would be quite a mystical experience. And so I felt incredibly physically relaxed, as if I had slept an entire night that afternoon. And felt incredibly a great degree of equanimity driving home in traffic from downtown Columbus to my home in the suburbs. There was no frustration with traffic. I was smiling at sort of the silly experience I was having. And it occurred to me, and we hear this all the time now, I'm not in traffic. I am traffic.
Mhm.
So however I experience traffic is solely the result of what I'm
Yeah.
imputing to the traffic. So that's the first example, a little woo woo. And then I've been practicing for many years, working at JP Morgan Chase, and had a great morning meditation that lasted a very long time, a transcendental meditation session. And then I drove to work and was experiencing, and I say this with great caution, experiencing some of the effects that were familiar to me having used psilocybin, having used magic mushrooms recreationally, in that the sunlight was remarkably clear and the warmth of it on my skin was deeply
Mhm.
intimate relationship
Mhm.
with the sun. And I encountered a coworker who I hadn't seen in more than a year. And I felt this overwhelming love for him. His name's Gerard. I felt this overwhelming affection, special affection. He's a lovely man. And I worked for him for years and I always respected him. But this was a connection. I felt very little space between me and him. The hug meant so much. This went on for hours and hours and hours throughout the day. And in fact, that evening I reached out to my teacher because I started to feel overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
It was There was a too muchness
Mhm.
in the availability of everything.
Yeah.
And so it took some. That's why we have teachers. He talked to me about it. So those are two
He
examples of
talked you
actual
down.
right. He
Talked you
talked
down
me
to the
down.
earth.
Right. He's like, you weren't on magic mushrooms. Settle down. You're still a human. It's going to be okay.
Right, right.
Those are two examples. And then just generically, my own wife, after a couple of weeks practicing transcendental meditation, after I learned it many years ago, unprompted, she observed how much calmer I seemed around the house. I
Yeah.
wasn't trying to be calmer.
Yeah.
I have twin sons. One of my sons also has learned transcendental meditation. Both of my sons talked about how I seemed really dialed down. They're like, "You're off 11, the
Yeah.
dial. You're
Yeah.
down at like a 3."
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good way to know if it's really working when your family tells you,
sure.
that's you're different.
Yeah,
So I
unprompted too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I want to share an experience I had, and it was not through meditation. It
Mm,
was a very, very impromptu kind of an experience. Somebody, a very, very dear friend of mine was dying of cancer.
mm,
And he was in Philadelphia, and I had gone to see him, essentially for the last time.
mhm.
And so after visiting him in his parents' home for a few days, his mother and him were driving me back to the airport. But before getting in the car, I was standing outside the car with him, just talking. And I don't know how long it was, but there was a moment where I didn't feel or notice or see or experience the physical part of me anymore. And there was this sense of kind of light and sort of like being part of everything,
Mm,
and a very, very positive kind of experience. And I couldn't even, like, it's like I'm floating up there, kind of, but it wasn't me, my body, or anything like that. It was like I was disconnected from my body and I was blended into everything else. And it
yeah,
was it was just, I don't know how long it was. It probably couldn't have been more than a few minutes, if that. But I had that experience that left me thinking, that's interesting. What the heck was that?
sure. That's
And
a transcendental state. That's a
right,
transcendental
right. And
state.
and I think I've read since then that some extreme emotions can bring you to
Mm,
that place as well.
sure. Sure. There's a really great book. It's popular with the transcendental meditators, but it's not really entirely about transcendental meditation. It's called Supreme Awakening.
Okay.
And it has chapter after chapter about non-transcendental meditators, non-meditators who are like William Blake, the great poet,
Hmm.
particular scientists who experience sometimes what we call flow
Flow
state.
state, yes.
Flow state,
Hmm.
or it appears as though they perhaps live much of their life in flow state, long periods in the state you were in, the transcendental state. My curiosity about Jesus when he was described to me, but I was a child and I didn't have the vocabulary for it. I was curious. He sounds like he lives in this state of consciousness,
Yeah.
and he was in the flesh and I'm in the flesh. So surely it must be available to me.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very interesting. I'm glad you had that experience. I'm sure forever you will hold that as a special
Oh, yes,
experience. It's
absolutely.
lovely.
And I think that
Yeah.
because of that experience, it probably propelled me more towards this path of trying to search and discover and understand and experience, maybe not experience, but really understand what is this, that this is out there and it's available and I experienced it without even trying. So there's got
Yeah.
to be something out there. It's not just about this bag of meat that we
Yeah.
carry around, and that's it, you're dead. I believe in science, but at the same time I also think that science is not able to explain everything, and that was like my little window into, oh yeah, there's more.
Sure. Yeah. And it's totally available to us, right? It's completely, and many times people, again, not advocating for the use of compounds and drugs, but we hear this oftentimes. I know in your practice you must hear this, like people who use psilocybin or they use magic mushrooms as they approach their own death. Perhaps they're terminally ill, and months ahead of their physical death, they seek relief in the use of magic mushrooms or any other number of compounds. And then after that 2 hour or 40 minute, DMT lasts what, 15 or 20 minutes, they come out the other side and they're like, I'm okay with it now.
Yeah.
I have the veil you refer to as the veil was briefly lifted long enough for me to see, oh, this thing, sure, I guess I'll miss it. Okay, yeah, it was a thing, but it's not everything. In fact, what I find interesting is, and I can't remember where I learned this, I learned it many years ago, when people are like, well, what is it? Where it, and I say to them when they ask, what is it? It is nothing. It is no thing. We're constantly thinking about things,
Yeah.
things, Cartesian. I can measure it, touch it. It's real, it's empirical. This that you and I are talking about, it becomes ineffable because it is nothing. It is no thing. That is a weird and enchanting experience.
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely. So I know that we have to stop soon, but I want us to continue this, this conversation and keep going because I think that there is so much value in what you and I are doing because I think that you are able to explain these things in a little bit higher level, and hopefully I can kind of bring it down a little and help like the non-meditators and the
Sure.
non-esoteric people understand what we are talking about. And that's sort of my goal in my practice, is to bring the eastern and the western side together. Here I'm working mostly with uh, people from the west, and I really value being able to bring the Eastern philosophies in. And I'm not saying that the Western philosophy doesn't have similar things, but I am more familiar with the Eastern because that's what I've studied. And bringing it to everyday people to sort of help them get relief from whatever struggles they are going through, and also enhance their lives on this earth. I mean, I'm not going
Sure.
to say, oh, you got to walk on a bed of nails so that you can go to heaven. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying use these practices now so you can have a better life now, but that's only the stepping stone, because there is
Sure.
more to it. Because once you start to change the trajectory of your life, even a little bit of an angle, it starts moving in a different direction.
Yeah, I think Dan, I know we're about to wrap up, but and I want to do a couple of plugs for resources that I think
Sure,
people will find.
absolutely.
But Dan Harris had that book, 10% Happier,
Yeah.
and he had the app, and it's principally a meditation app. I have no connection with Dan Harris. I did read the book, but you said just a little bit, like no miracle required is my motto.
Yeah.
No miracle required here. It's all available to all of us. It is our birthright to experience equanimity and peace. For people who want to experience or explore ways to experience meditation practice, I happen to be a big fan of Sam Harris's app, which is called Waking Up.
Okay.
And it's a subscription app, but his service is very generous. If the subscription is a little too expensive, they give you like 30 days for free. And he has guided meditation, mindfulness meditation in the app. It's a course, and every day you're coached a little bit through the app, and you can track your progress. That's a great way to learn mindfulness. The Waking Up app, that's Sam Harris's product. And then for people who are interested in transcendental meditation, that I'm a practitioner of and a long time student of, going to tm.org, you can read a lot there. There's a lot of medical studies in like Journal of American Medical Association or Medical Sciences. Since the 1950s, many medical schools and universities have been studying the physical benefits, like for cardiovascular benefits, emotional benefits. So I would encourage people to read those.
MBSR is one of the, mindfulness-based stress reduction. So there's also mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And so there are lots of, and those are all highly researched and evidence-based. So,
yeah, I think people should look for evidence. That's the Western part of me.
Right.
That's the Cartesian part of me. We should be able to measure things, but once we're done measuring, we should just experience them.
Right. Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on. I am hoping that we are going to be able to do this again. And
I hope so too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
I enjoyed this very much. Maybe in person one day soon.
Right. Yeah, Louisville's not that far, so and
pretty close.
I have lots of people that I can go visit in Louisville. So you guys
Come on
included.
down.
Yes. So thank you so much.